The first 18 months of your child's life are unlike any other period in human development. In no other window of time does the brain grow this fast, wire this deeply, or absorb this much from the environment around it. By the time your baby turns 18 months old, their brain will have formed more than 1 million new neural connections per second. Every single day, these connections are not random, they are shaped by experience, by what the people around them respond, by the patterns that repeat themselves again and again in the earliest weeks and months of life. And here is what that means for you as a parent. The things you do consistently during this window, not the dramatic moments, not the big decisions, but the small, ordinary daily patterns, are laying down architecture, neural architecture that will shape how your child learns, how they regulate their emotions, how they relate to other people, and how they understand themselves for the rest of their life. This is not said to create pressure. It is said because most parents are never told this. Most parents move through the first 18 months managing exhaustion, learning as they go, doing their best, without anyone ever explaining what is actually happening inside their baby's developing brain, or what the science says about which patterns matter most. This video is about 5 of the most common mistakes parents make during this window. Not because these parents are doing anything wrong, but because the mistakes are invisible. They don't look like mistakes. Many of them look like good parenting, or at least like neutral parenting. And that is exactly why they are worth knowing about, because once you see them, you can change them, and in this window, changing them matters more than at almost any other time. Mistake number 1. Treating silence as the goal. There is enormous cultural pressure on parents of young babies to have a quiet baby, a baby who sleeps through the night, a baby who doesn't fuss, a baby who can be put down and left to their own devices without protest. And so many parents, without realizing it, begin organizing their entire approach around reducing their baby's cries. They rush to stop the noise. They treat the silence as the sign that things are going well. Here's what most people don't understand about infant crying. Crying is not a behavior problem. It is communication. It is the only communication tool a baby has. And what the baby is communicating every single time is not a demand or a manipulation. It is a signal from a nervous system that is overwhelmed, uncomfortable, or in need of something it cannot provide for itself. When a baby cries and a caregiver responds, consistently, warmly, without delay, something very specific happens in the brain. The stress response that was activated by the discomfort begins to come down. The nervous system learns a pattern. Distress signals are received. Help arrives. The world is responsive. Over hundreds and then thousands of repetitions of this pattern, the baby's brain builds something called felt safety, a deep physiological sense that the environment is reliable, that needs will be met, that distress does not have to be carried alone. This is the neurological foundation of secure attachment, and it is built entirely through responsiveness to crying in the first months of life. Now here is what happens when the goal is silence instead of responsiveness. When a baby's cries are consistently ignored, delayed, or met with frustration, the brain learns a different pattern. Distress signals are not reliably received. Help does not reliably arrive. The nervous system adapts by learning to stop signaling, not because the need has gone away, but because signaling has proven ineffective. This is the baby that stops crying after a few nights of sleep training, not because they have learned to self-soothe, but because they have learned that crying doesn't work. The long-term consequence of this pattern is not a well-adjusted independent child. It is a child whose nervous system learned, in its most formative period, that the world is not reliably responsive to their needs. That adaptation shapes their relationships, their emotional regulation, and their capacity for trust in ways that will still be visible decades later. Here's what to do instead. Respond to your baby's cries as quickly and consistently as you can, especially in the first 6 months. You cannot spoil an infant. That idea is not supported by any credible developmental research. What you can do, and what responding does, is build the neural architecture of felt safety. You don't need to respond perfectly every time. You just need the pattern to be consistent enough that the baby's nervous system can predict. When I signal distress, someone comes. That prediction is everything. Mistake number 2. Narrating less than you think you need to. There is a vast body of research on what is sometimes called the word gap, the difference in language exposure between children from different backgrounds, and how that gap predicts outcomes across almost every area of development. But the finding that matters most for this video has nothing to do with vocabulary size. It has to do with a specific type of talk. Talk that researchers call serve and return interaction. And it is the most powerful developmental tool available to any parent, in any language, at any income level, in any kind of home. Serve and return is simple. The baby does something, makes a sound, reaches toward an object, looks at your face, bangs a toy on the floor, and the caregiver responds, not just with a smile, but with language. With a word or phrase that connects to what the baby just did. Oh, you found the red one. You're looking at the dog. You want to reach that sound you just made. Let's hear it again. Each one of these exchanges is a neural event. The baby produces something. The caregiver reflects it back, with language attached. The brain registers. What I do produces a response. My experience has words. The world reacts to me. This is how language develops. It is also how the sense of self develops. And it is how the baby learns that they are an agent, that their actions have effects, that their communications matter, that the world is interactive rather than something that simply happens to them. The mistake most parents make here is not that they don't talk to their baby. Most parents talk to their babies. The mistake is that they narrate their own activity rather than the baby's experience. I'm making your bottle now. Mummy's getting your clothes. Here comes the diaper. This is all good. None of it is harmful. But it is fundamentally different from narrating what the baby is doing, seeing, feeling, and expressing. You're watching me. You're really looking hard at that. Oh, that surprised you, didn't it? You don't like that texture. You want more of that. This type of narration, child-directed, experience-focused, responsive to what the baby is actually doing, is the kind that builds the neural architecture of language and selfhood. What to do? Start narrating your baby's experience rather than your own. Follow their gaze, comment on what they reach for, respond to their sounds as if they are words, ask them questions you know they can't yet answer, and then pause as if you're waiting. Their brain is doing something in that pause. It is learning the rhythm of conversation. This is not something you need to do every waking minute, but building the habit of serve and return, of responding to the baby's cues with language and attention, during feeding, during nappy changes, during the ordinary moments of the day, will build more than vocabulary. It will build a mind that feels known. Mistake number 3. Resolving every frustration before it has a chance to become productive. There is a concept in developmental psychology called the just right challenge. It refers to a task that is slightly beyond a baby or toddler's current ability. Difficult enough to require effort, but not so difficult that it produces overwhelming distress. The just right challenge is where development happens, not in mastery and not in failure, but in the space between them. The moment of effortful reaching, the repeated attempt, the figuring out, and many loving parents, without realizing it, eliminate that space entirely. Their baby is reaching for something and can't quite get it. They hand it over. Their toddler is struggling with a shape sorter. They show them how. Their child is trying to stack blocks and they keep falling. They fix the stack. Each one of these interventions feels kind. And individually, none of them is harmful. But when the pattern becomes automatic, when a parent's reflex is to resolve difficulty before the child has had time to work with it, the baby never gets the experience of what it feels like to try, persist, and succeed on their own terms. What the brain learns from the just right challenge, when allowed to work through it, is something irreplaceable. It learns that effort produces outcomes, that the feeling of being stuck is not the end of the process, but part of it, that the slight discomfort of not yet knowing is survivable and often followed by the deep satisfaction of figuring it out. This is where intrinsic motivation is born, not from being handed things, from working for them. The long-term consequence of overhelping is not a child who feels supported. It is a child who has never learned to tolerate the feeling of not yet knowing. Who reaches for help the moment difficulty appears? Who has a low threshold for the frustration that is inseparable from learning? Here's what to do instead. When your baby or toddler is struggling with something, pause before you intervene. Give them more time than feels comfortable. Watch their face if they are frustrated but engaged, still trying, still reaching. Stay back. Be present. Narrate what you see. You're really working on that. You almost had it. You're trying again. This is not passive parenting. This is active witnessing. And it tells the child something essential. I see you working. I believe you can do this. I'm not going to take it away from you by solving it first. Intervene when the frustration tips into genuine distress, but let the just right challenge do its work before it gets there. That zone of productive effort, brief, age-appropriate, supported by your presence, is where some of the most important development of the first 18 months takes place. Mistake number 4. Underestimating how much babies read your nervous system. One of the most important and least discussed findings in developmental neuroscience is this. In the first 18 months of life, a baby does not primarily learn about the world through their own direct experience. They learn about the world through you. This is called social referencing. When a baby encounters something new or uncertain, their first instinct is not to evaluate it themselves. It is to look at your face and read your response to it. Is this safe? The baby looks at you. You look calm and curious. The baby approaches. Is this okay? The baby looks at you. You look tense and anxious. The baby withdraws. This is not a conscious process. It happens in milliseconds. And it happens dozens of times every day. What it means is that your nervous system is your baby's primary source of information about the world. When you are regulated, they borrow that regulation. When you are chronically stressed, anxious, or emotionally unpredictable, they borrow that too. And their developing nervous system begins to calibrate itself around what it consistently receives. The mistake here is not being stressed. Stress is part of life, especially the life of a new parent. The mistake is assuming that because the baby can't understand your words, they are not picking up on your emotional state. They are picking up on almost nothing else. A baby doesn't know what your mortgage is. They don't understand your work stress or your relationship difficulties. But they are exquisitely sensitive to the tone of your voice, the tension in your arms when you hold them, the difference between a face that is present and a face that is somewhere else. Over months, if the caregiver's nervous system is consistently in a state of dysregulation, the baby's nervous system learns to mirror that state as its baseline. This is one of the less visible but most significant pathways through which parental mental health affects infant development. Here is what to do. This is not about performing calm you don't feel. Babies can read inauthenticity. It is about 2 things. The first is regulation before interaction. When you know you are stressed or overwhelmed, take 60 seconds before picking up your baby. Breathe. Let your own nervous system come down even partially. What you bring into that interaction is what they receive. The second is repair. On the days when you are dysregulated and you know the baby felt it, you were short, you were tense, the energy in the room was difficult. Come back. Hold them calmly afterward. The nervous system learns from patterns, not single events. One difficult interaction followed by a return to warmth teaches resilience. A consistent pattern of dysregulation without repair teaches something else entirely. You don't need to be perfectly regulated. You need to be regulated enough, often enough, that the baby's baseline is one of safety rather than vigilance. Mistake number 5. Waiting for the right moment to connect instead of using the moments you have. This is perhaps the most common mistake and the most understandable. The first 18 months of parenting are physically and emotionally exhausting. You are functioning on interrupted sleep. You are managing feeding schedules, developmental milestones, physical recovery, and the complete reorganization of your identity and your life. The idea of adding one more intentional thing to do feels overwhelming. And so, connection, the deep, face-to-face, fully present kind of connection, becomes something parents plan to do later, after the chores, after the baby's nap, when they're not so tired, when things settle down. Things don't settle down. And the waiting means that the connection moments that do happen are squeezed between everything else, rushed or half present. Here is what the research shows about what babies actually need in terms of connection. They don't need long periods of sustained attention. They need frequent, brief moments of full presence. A study of early caregiver-infant interaction found that what predicts secure attachment is not the amount of time a caregiver spends with their baby, but the quality of the contact during naturally occurring moments. Nappy changes, feeding, the few minutes before a nap. The bath that becomes a game. The nappy change where you make eye contact and wait for them to make a sound and respond to it as if they said something important. The feed where you put your phone down and just look at their face. These moments are already in your day. Every day. Multiple times a day. They don't require extra time. They require a different quality of presence in the time you're already spending. The long-term consequence of consistently half-present interaction is not a neglected child. It is a child whose nervous system learns that attention is intermittent, that connection is something that happens around the edges of other things, that they are part of a life rather than at the center of a relationship. Babies whose caregivers are consistently physically present but emotionally absent, looking at a screen during feeding, managing the nappy change on autopilot, are receiving proximity without attunement. And it is attunement, not proximity, that builds secure attachment. Here's what to do. Choose 2 or 3 of the recurring moments in your daily routine and make them connection moments. Fully. Put the phone in another room. Get on the floor. Make eye contact. Follow their lead. Respond to every sound and gesture as if it matters. Because it does. You don't need to sustain this for hours. You need to sustain it for 5 minutes, 3 times a day. 15 minutes of full presence, distributed through the day, will do more for your baby's developing brain than hours of shared space where neither of you is fully there. That is not a large ask. But in the first 18 months, it may be one of the most important commitments you make. 5 mistakes, none of them obvious, none of them the result of not caring enough or not trying hard enough. All of them rooted in the gap between what we assume babies need and what the science of early development actually shows. The baby that is allowed to communicate without being rushed into silence. The baby whose experience is narrated and reflected back to them. The baby who's allowed the productive struggle of the just right challenge. The baby whose caregiver's regulated nervous system becomes the model for their own. The baby who receives full presence, even briefly, many times a day. That baby is building something in the first 18 months that will be the foundation of everything that comes after. Not because of any single interaction, but because of the pattern, the consistent, repeated daily pattern of what it feels like to be met. You don't have to be a perfect parent to give a child that foundation. You just have to understand what you're building and why the small moments are the ones that matter most. The first 18 months will not come back, but the things you learn in them will shape everything that does.